Welcome back, seekers of the strange and the macabre. Tonight, we peel back the layers of history quite literally. We travel to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, when Europe's thirst for knowledge collided with its darkest taboos. Imagine a theater, not filled with music or drama, but with the silence of hundreds of eyes fixed on a single body. At the center, not an actor, but a corpse. This is the story of the anatomy theaters, where men of science turned death into spectacle, where criminals' punishment continued beyond the grave, and where the secrets of the human body were revealed in blood and shadow. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because tonight's tale is not for the faint of heart. For centuries, the human body was untouchable. Christian Europe declared it sacred, destined for resurrection. Cutting into it was seen as desecration. Doctors were forced to rely on ancient texts, Hippocrates, Galen, and Arabic scholars like Avicenna. They copied diagrams endlessly, but rarely saw a real organ. Yet, by the 13th century, whispers began. What if the books were wrong? In Bologna, a record from 1315 describes the dissection of a criminal's body, authorized by city leaders. Students crowded in, watching as the body was cut open. It was shocking, it was horrifying, and it was addictive. From then on, dissection became not only tolerated, but demanded. By the 1500s, universities in Italy, the Netherlands, and beyond needed proper spaces. So they built anatomy theaters, wooden amphitheaters designed for one performance, dissection. The first permanent theater was built in Padua in 1594. Steep, narrow benches rose high above a central wooden table. The design forced every eye downward. No escape. In the Netherlands, Leiden's theater added cabinets of curiosity, skeletons of criminals, stuffed animals, dried organs, and even Egyptian mummies. Visitors wandered through halls of preserved death before taking their seats for the day's lecture. These were not quiet classrooms. They were dark arenas. Picture it. Winter. The air is icy. Torches flicker against dark wood. A body is carried in a criminal freshly executed at dawn. The crowd holds its breath. Students clutch notebooks. Nobles lean forward, morbidly fascinated. At the table, the barber surgeon begins. A knife flashes. Flesh parts. The professor, dressed in black, does not touch the corpse. He stands above, reading Latin texts aloud, comparing each cut to Galen's words. The audience reacts, gasps at the sight of the lungs, murmurs when the heart is exposed. In one student's diary from Padua, he wrote, "The heart was smaller than expected, the stomach larger, some swooned. One lady fainted, yet I could not look away. It was theater. It was science. It was death unveiled." Most bodies came from the gallows. For the condemned, death was not the end. Execution was followed by dissection, a second humiliation. To be denied a grave meant to be denied salvation. Records describe criminals weeping before death, begging priests to protect their bodies. Some families bribed guards to steal the corpse before it was taken. One account tells of a thief executed in Bologna. His body was seized before his mother could bury him. On the table, students carved and laughed while she screamed outside the doors. For society, it was justice. For the family, it was desecration. The hunger for bodies grew. Universities needed dozens each year, but executions were few. Whispers spread, grave robbing. In Paris, students crept into cemeteries at night, digging up fresh corpses. In Padua, entire families accused surgeons of stealing relatives. Some rumors went further, that the poor were murdered in secret, their bodies sold to schools. No proof survives, but fear lingered. The church condemned the practice. Yet many clergy turned a blind eye, especially when dissections exposed God's supposed design. The line between science and crime blurred. Who attended these dissections? Not only students. In Padua, citizens bought tickets. Nobles attended for entertainment. Even children were sometimes allowed, as a lesson in mortality. Travelers wrote letters describing the spectacle. One Dutch visitor in Leiden marveled. "We saw the body of a murderer, open for all to view. His hand that once held a knife now lay still, while his ribs were counted like ivory beads." Artists sketched the scenes. Etchings survive, showing crowded theaters, professors pointing with canes, surgeons cutting, while rows of faces leaned forward in morbid awe. It was education. It was punishment. It was voyeurism. The church walked a dangerous line. On one hand, dissection seemed to violate the sanctity of the body. On the other, it revealed God's craftsmanship. Some priests argued to study the body was to honor the Creator. Others declared it blasphemy. When plague swept Europe, dissections became both feared and necessary. Doctors begged for permission to cut plague victims, hoping to find answers. Priests resisted, fearing it spread disease and damnation. But knowledge pressed forward. Slowly, taboo gave way to curiosity. By the 18th century, anatomy theaters evolved into laboratories. Dissection became routine, less spectacle, more science. But the memory of those dark halls remained. Skeletons of criminals hung in universities for centuries. Some still remain today silent witnesses to a time when justice and knowledge carved the same flesh. The legacy is double-edged. Without the theaters, medicine would have advanced far slower. Yet, the cost was dignity, humanity, and respect for the dead. Narrator, somber closing. So we return to the question, were anatomy theaters a triumph of science or a crime against humanity? They gave us knowledge, but they also gave us nightmares. And in the end, every discovery was written in the same ink. Blood. Tell us what you think. Were these theaters a necessary evil or simply evil? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more dark tales where history and horror intertwine.